If you're a Maserati fan, you just deserve better. This compared to like a Lexus or a Genesis interior, those things leave this for dead.
Now, if you think that the engine in your Maserati is this beautiful piece of handcrafted Italian mechanical art built to the highest standards by a specialist engineer, yeah, I'm sorry, I got some bad news for you.
I think my issue with it is it doesn't feel Italian enough. Now look, we're sure you've heard and seen all the horror stories and vicious accusations that these are a truly terrible car and they should be avoided at all costs. But is there actually any truth to any of that? Because a quick scroll through the owners groups and forums will uncover dozens of tales of faultless ownership experiences, with many fans claiming that the Ghibli is one of the great underappreciated Italian gems on the used market. See, according to them, and you won't believe this, but when it comes to the criticisms here, apparently the interwebs is lying. Or is it? Look, I tell you what, how about we work out once and for all if a used Ghibli is as good or bad as they say. Let's start with the bad news first, and that means talking about electronics. Now look, you know how frustrated you can get when your phone plays up, like depending on what day it is or what time it is or which way the wind is blowing, it can get all glitchy and slow, or it just locks up and fails to work at all. Well, unfortunately, the same can happen for the Ghibli's parking sensors, the rear view camera, the power mirrors, or the headlights and tail lights can flicker and fail, or the power windows, and actually this one's a classic. Plenty of owners have had an issue where the power window goes up, but then when it hits the top, it then goes back to like the halfway point, and it just keeps repeating this over and over and over again, so it never wants to close. Or some owners have had the issue where the window won't close at all when the car's in sports mode. What? One owner actually mentioned to us that the window had to be recalibrated, but the problem was when he closed the door, the window then forced its way all the way down and kept trying to force its way down to the point that smoke started pouring out of the door because the motor basically worked itself to death. This obviously necessitated a new wiper motor and also new rails, and being a Maserati, that cost a small fortune. But then there are the owners that have reported that the electronic seat adjustment mechanisms, these things can also play up. And then there's the gauge clusters that seem to be hypochondriacs in the way that it'll light up like a Christmas tree with every conceivable warning, even though there's actually nothing wrong with the car at all. Or maybe the car has one small fault, but it's like it plays it safe and warns you of every possible drama that can happen. The problem with that is it makes diagnose what the actual problem is a bit of a nightmare. Actually, a great example of this is the fuel filler cap that can fail to open or close properly, but the way it warns you that it's having a tantrum is to give you a check engine light. Now look, these electronic gremlins, they do seem to be far more prevalent on the pre-update cars, although in saying that, some of the post-update cars, we're starting to see more and more electronic gremlins pop up in those as they age. And as far as the root causes for many of these issues, look, it can be everything from battery drainage issues, sometimes sensors on their way out, dodgy modules, or just some sketchy wiring from the factory. And then some owners have reported that with the key fob, which by the way is so big and heavy you could use it as a paperweight, but the problem is the buttons can get stuck down. That sends a signal to the car which activates various modules that pulls power from the battery, and eventually the battery runs out of power. Or maybe these electronic problems can be due to some water ingress issues. Like any car with a sunroof, if these things aren't serviced correctly or the drainage channels aren't cleaned and cleared properly, it can lead to all sorts of water ingress issues and just problems with the sunroof. However, with the Ghibli, apparently the glue or the seal around the windscreen, it can also degrade over time, and that can let water leak in, and eventually the water finds its way into the cabin and can impact the already sensitive electronics. Speaking of glue failing, quite a few owners have also reported issues with various pieces of trim or just plastic bits kind of coming loose, sometimes even just falling off. And the overall build quality and just fit and finish can be quite disappointing. Unfortunately, there are plenty of stories of owners that have had to take their car back to the dealership time and time again to get panel gaps fixed up, or the panels just don't quite sort of meet up properly. I mean, how does this even happen? Like, Maserati is supposed to be this premium brand, but then you find like a Suzuki Ignis and there are no reports of inconsistent panel gaps. The fit and finish and build quality on an Ignis is near perfect, but on a Maserati, how can it be this bad? If you're a Maserati fan, you just deserve better. Even inside, there are so many reports of just the interior trim falling apart. Apparently anything made of plastic in here can become brittle and just fail over time. And I tell you what, there is a lot of plastic in here. Even if the car has been optioned with this stunning carbon fiber trim. This has been known to crack, and if it's the gloss black plastic option, it can scratch if you look at it the wrong way. Owners have also reported that if you leave the car outside for too long, the leather on the dash can start to shrink, and the glue that holds it in place can fail over time, so you just end up with like a wrinkly mess. It ends up looking a little bit like Clint Eastwood's neck. But be careful with this, because if the original owner forked out the $16,000 for the optional luxury pack, the fine grain leather is extremely expensive to replace and repair. Actually, you know what? No matter what the leather option here, unless it's looked after fastidiously or garaged constantly, there are so many reports of it just fading or peeling or just becoming loose all over the car, just like in this one. Also, if, or I should say when, the sun visors fail, guess how much for a replacement? One owner was quoted just under $1,000 for this. Are you f***ing kidding me? It shouldn't fail in the first place. It's supposed to be a premium car, for God's sake. And the same can go for the driving experience. You're probably expecting to be swept away by some feelings of premium refinement, but what you might actually be greeted with is just a cacophony of rattles and squeaks and weird noises. Even in this car, this is one of the better examples out there, but there are still just some little rattles and strange noises happening. Even when it comes to ride quality and handling, even when these are at their best, it's honestly nothing special. Look, this suspension setup might be perfectly fine for smooth European roads, but here in Australia, on our course roads with potholes bloody everywhere and road acne, honestly, it can just feel a bit cheap and nasty. Also, if you're, let's say, exploring the car's dynamic ability and pushing it through a corner a little bit and then hit a decent sized bump mid-corner, of which there are many on Aussie roads, it can feel pretty sketchy pretty quickly. Also, hot tip too, I know fitting larger wheels looks very, very cool on these. However, it can have quite the negative impact on the already pretty underwhelming ride and handling. And also, the other issue with the suspension is that it can just fail. Firstly, for overseas models with the regular passive suspension setup, the springs, they can actually break. The problem here is that it puts extra pressure on the struts and then they wear out, and then you've got to replace it all, and being a Maserati, that's going to cost a fortune. And then all Aussie delivered models come with the electronically controlled Skyhook suspension, which we can only assume has been named after the classic Aussie 70s rock band Skyhooks. And just pray that it never fails, because what Maserati will try to charge you for OEM replacements is basically daylight robbery. And the same can be said for plenty of the suspension components. By now, plenty of control arms and bushers will probably need replacement. Also, hot tip, just make sure you check the top of the strut towers. Worst case scenario, fatiguing suspension can put more pressure on the top of the strut tower, and this can warp or, in some cases, even crack. Now, there was a service bulletin to fix this, so you'd like to think it has been sorted, but check this whole area and the other side thoroughly. Also, and look, obviously this can vary depending on how you drive, but plenty of owners have reported premature brake and tyre wear. Now look, for these things to be at their best, they really do require premium tyres, but also the right alignment settings. However, in saying that, even with premium tyres and the right alignment settings, you might want to budget in for replacement tyres more often than you're anticipating. Oh, and with the brakes as well, there are plenty of complaints about these things wearing out way too fast and then covering your wheels in dust as they do it. But a bit of a hot tip here with all of these suspension and brake components. According to the owners, avoid the Maserati OEM stuff and check out quality aftermarket items instead. Quite often they can outperform, outlast, and cost substantially less than the factory fitted items. Aftermarket components can also fix another common failure point, these shithouse infotainment systems. Now look, in its defense, these were improved with the 2017 update, adding Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, and again in 2021 with a larger screen and the latest Maserati interface. But even when they're working at their best, they simply cannot match the infotainment systems in the Germans, like the BMW 5 Series, Mercedes-Benz E-Class and Audi A6. But look, across the board, and especially in the pre-2021 updates, these things are renowned for glitchy operations and just being really slow, screens locking up or becoming unresponsive, Bluetooth and phone connectivity issues, you name it, they can suffer from it. Actually, one really annoying trait they can have is that, say you're on a phone call, it can just randomly mute the call. So you're left having to grab your phone, pull the lead out, and hopefully throw it on speakerphone to actually talk to whoever you were talking to. Obviously you can't Can't do that when you're driving though, because it's dangerous and illegal. Also, the speakers, they can go all crackly, although this might be due to the amplifiers in the boot slowly dying, which is a common thing. Now look, sometimes a simple software update can fix many of these infotainment gremlins, or maybe you should just do what plenty of owners recommend, which is just ditch the entire factory system and replace it with quality aftermarket components. Now look, we've actually teamed up with our mates at Automotive Superstore to make a full video guide on the ins and outs of all of these in-car entertainment sorts of things. Also, they're the guys to see when it comes to aftermarket brake packages and suspension parts and engine parts, even dash cams, car care, loads of different accessories. Make sure you check them out, the link is down below. Unfortunately, something that can't be fixed with aftermarket parts is the steering feel, and especially in the post-update cars. After 2017, these changed over to an electronically assisted rack, and look, according to the fans, sure, it made it lighter and easier to use, but it lost any sort of feel or charm about the steering. And isn't that what driving a Maserati is all about? You should be able to feel the sense of Italian romance coming through the wheel. And then on these pre-update cars, look, these do feel better than post-update cars because it's hydraulically assisted and it's, kind of classic Maserati steering. However, these can be guilty of a few issues as well. You can get a bit of a grinding feel through the steering. That can be everything from a loose brake caliper, or sometimes there can be metal particles that get into the actual fluid itself, or sometimes it can be a lower ball joint coming loose, or a bunch of other things. There can be a host of issues with the steering, basically. Also, the turning circle can make life a bit more of a challenge than it needs to be, especially in built-up areas. Here we go, I'm going to do a U-E here, and that's the turning circle, which means I've got to go for Austin Powers. No, drive, there we go. There we go. Terrible turning circle. Now, did you just notice then that I was struggling to find drive from reverse? This is a bit of a common issue with these cars. Even when driving, the gearboxes can feel a bit jerky between gear changes, and in this one, I'm really struggling to park sometimes. It just takes a few seconds for the gearbox to work out what the hell is going on. Chances are a software update can fix a lot of this up, but it can just be some premature wear issues. It's just disappointing. And the same goes for the air conditioning system. Like this, okay, this shouldn't be a problem in a premium car, yet so many owners have had to spend thousands and thousands of dollars fixing all sorts of HVAC problems. In fact, one owner told us that he had to spend just over $200 just to get a blown air conditioning fuse replaced. What? But look, luckily when everything is working properly, it is a really lovely place to be. Sort of. I mean, in terms of living with it, you've got pretty decent practicality. You've got a felt-lined glove box there, but it's more of a shelf than a box. You've got 2 cup holders here, and they will hold small pretentious coffees like a piccolo, also a cigarette lighter. Under here, you've got your auxiliary and USB inputs. Also, that is felt lined, so nothing's going to rattle around. A split fold center console here with a pretty good amount of space down there, and there's actually extra cup holders in there as well, which is quite good. This door bin's completely crap. You can't hold anything in there that has more than 2 dimensions. This collects filth in no time. This little cubby hole here is oddly shaped, but at least felt lined, so nothing's going to rattle around there too much. No sunglasses holder, nothing under the seats, no net down there. I just think for the size of the interior, it's not a real smart use of space. And then as far as comfort goes, these seats, they're okay, I guess. They're not a standout, but they're not too bad. Good levels of adjustment. But then there's other ergonomic annoyances. The transmission tunnel is so huge. My left foot, I can just feel naturally wants to sort of go over here, but it's being forced to the right. So I can't get quite comfortable enough. But then because of that, my knee is sort of being forced onto the center console. But because of that, you get a lot of rubbing and creaking and plastic noises from there. And also, with such beautiful exterior design, you'd like to think that the interior kind of matches it. But it doesn't really. This is going to sound really bad, but this whole center fascia kind of reminds me of like a Dodge pickup truck or giant ute. And just the overall ergonomics, I don't know, it's not quite right. Also, there's not a sense or feeling of quality or a good fit and finish in here. This compared to like a Lexus or a Genesis interior, those things leave this for dead. Actually, they'll probably also dominate this in terms of the amount of features and equipment you're going to get. Look, don't get me wrong, these aren't sparse at all. Even early base models still have a decent amount of kit. But things like heated and ventilated seats or a 360-degree camera. Things that are pretty much standard on a Genesis. On these, they're going to be part of one of the several different option packs. And also, on the pre-update cars, I feel like the rear view camera has about the same resolution as like an early Etch-a-Sketch. Like, look at this. But look, luckily the levels of safety in these are really, really good, especially if you go for a later model, because some of the safety systems that were originally optional became standard as the car ages. Although in saying that, like so many modern cars with safety features, there are plenty of complaints that the calibrations are far too sensitive when you're driving. Although in saying that, it seems that a lot of these issues have been solved with the more recent updates. Actually, fun fact about that 2017 update, according to Maserati, 70% of the car was all new. Really? Which bits? Because compared to the pre-update, they look nearly identical. Although, that's not a bad thing. Okay, look, the update is a little bit more aggressive down low, and the later updates also accentuated the car's best attributes. But why change anything at all when the designers got it so right from the start? I mean, this thing, I don't know if the camera is picking it up, but it is such an attractive car. It's just a shame that the engineers seem to have dropped the ball with everything going on under the sexy skin. Actually, on the topic of things that are extremely attractive, did you know that Cameron Diaz has owned one of these and a Quattroporte? And I'm exactly 14 centimeters taller than her. This is in my driving position, and I'll be honest, I was expecting more. First of all, my feet are pretty much cramped under the seats. There's not a whole lot of knee room. This is kind of the same amount of room as you'll find in the back of a lot of smaller hatchbacks. The seats themselves, granted these ones I doubt have ever been sat in. They are so firm, but they're not very supportive at all. I don't know, you wouldn't want to sit in the middle either. Look at the size of the transmission tunnel. You're going to want to be an amputee or a toddler to sit back there comfortably. And then, yeah, I don't know, it's just not grabbing me. Not grabbing me back here. It looks beautiful. That's about where it ends. Even as far as features and practicality, you've got, okay, your own air vents, but there's no power outputs back here. You've got nets, so if you go fishing, you've got somewhere to keep your barramundi. There are door bins, but you can't get to them if you've got legs. You've got a pull-down armrest here with a cup holder that's supposed to open, but it doesn't, sort of. Under here, you've got more felt line storage. Also, this is where your 12-volt and USB outputs are. But then that means you can't use them if you've got someone in the middle seat. Bit of an oversight there. That's about it for back here. And then in the boot, firstly, listen to this. Doesn't sound very expensive, does it? Then as far as space in the boot, look, it's pretty much the same as what you'll find in the Germans, around about 500 litres, which is a little bit larger than what a Lexus or Genesis will offer. And speaking of offering things, if you join our membership program by hitting the link below, you're going to get a few more ReDriven perks. And if you hit that subscribe button, you're going to help us make more free car videos for you. So do yourself a favour and hit subscribe. While you're at it, also hit the WiperTech link below to get yourself 15% off and free express shipping on the only wiper blades we use, because they are some of the best blades in the business. And compared to what some of the OEMs will charge you, they should be cheaper. They'll probably also last longer, and they'll probably do a damn sight better job as well. Check them out, links down below. Now look, if you already own one of these or you're a fan of it, can I ask you a question? What am I missing? What am I missing here? I don't really get it. I mean, look, yeah, okay, the paddle shifters are wonderful to use. Flick it into sport mode, into manual. Oh my God, like the shifters. What I'm finding, I'm going hunting for roundabouts and corners and even traffic just to play with these. They're so enjoyable to use, which is the polar opposite to every other car in this class. But then, overall, it just feels a bit big and bulky. I've actually tried a few different driving positions, but no matter where I sit, I can't get a good vision out of it. Sometimes I really struggle to judge where the extremities of the car are. And overall, I'll be honest, it's just not really doing much for me. I think my issue with it is it doesn't feel Italian enough. I mean, it's a Maserati. It should have this charm about it. It should have character and like an Italian romance about it. You should feel special driving it, and it just, I don't know, just meh. And look, this is the petrol V6, and it is a hell of an engine. It makes all the right sounds. It's plenty fast enough, but it does feel like a really excitable engine just bolted into a bit of a conservative body. Doesn't really match. And then with the diesel, look, aside from the enormous amounts of torque, I'm gathering that would be even less appealing to drive. And then with the V8, look, okay, I'm sure that would make a world of difference. That thing will just suck you in like anything. But even then, it still feels like the fundamentals of the car just aren't really sorted out. Actually, speaking of the diesel and the V8 and this engine, what's the story mechanically in terms of reliability? Because Maserati don't exactly have the best reputation when it comes to that topic. I can't tell you about it, but because I'm not a qualified mechanic. But luckily Jim is.
As for the 4-cylinder hybrid, look, no one really actually cares because they hardly sold any, so I'm going to skip it and go straight to the V6. In twin-turbo petrol form, these are actually okay if they've been meticulously serviced, and I mean absolutely meticulously serviced. They do have a few random issues with fuel pumps and vacuum pumps and things, but none of which you'd call really common problems. What is a common problem though is people not servicing them enough. And when this happens, the timing chain guides start to deteriorate, they break, and all those fragments go down into the sump, and then that plastic gets sucked up into the oil pickup, and then you have oil starvation issues, and then you have catastrophic engine failure. The problem here is people think they're doing the right thing by sticking to the 20,000 kilometre service interval, which is just terrible for any engine. My tip here is do it every 10,000 kilometres, and if you want the thing to last, do it every 5. Now the V6 in diesel form, that's actually made by VM Motori, which is actually one of the biggest engine builders you've probably never heard of. And that engine is sort of reliable. It's also used in a bunch of Jeeps and 1500 Ram trucks, so it's pretty common. So yeah, not the hand-built, exclusive, bespoke performance engine you might have thought. I mean, it's in a bunch of Jeeps, so yeah, it's not special. Some of the problems you might see, there's an issue with the drive belt and the tensioners. They can fail. Pro tip here is just do all of them, belt, tensioners, idlers, the whole lot. Do it all at 100,000 kilometres. They can have EGR cooler issues and EGR valve complications as well. And they're also known for oil cooler leaks. Now they leak internally and they are responsible for causing oil and coolant cross-contamination. And if that's left unchecked, that can cause serious engine damage. Now, another serious problem you might see, although it's not terribly common, and it's purely a cost-cutting measure, it's where the exhaust cam slips on the exhaust cam shaft. Now, if you're lucky, you'll get a fault code telling you there's a correlation issue. If you're unlucky, you just get an engine failure. Now, the V8, and who doesn't love a V8? But if you are that guy telling people your Maserati has a Ferrari engine, stop it. That's like saying Gordon Ramsay cooked your meal when all he actually did was went and got the groceries. The Ferrari engine has a flat plane crank and a dry sump and is actually beautiful. The Maserati engine has a cross plane crank, a wet sump, and it is pretty much filled with commercial grade internals. Reliability wise, it's not that bad. Some of the early versions had some camshaft variator complications where they just rattle terribly. And sometimes they'd rattle to the point where they'd actually fail and you'd have engine timing issues. The later models had an upgraded oil check valve which fixed that problem, and you can upgrade the old ones too. The problem here is that cam gear is at the back of the engine where the timing chains are, and to fix it, you've got to take the whole thing out, and it's eye-wateringly expensive. There are also some reports of head gasket complications, not a hugely common problem though, and tends to be more of an issue if the engine has been tuned or if you're leaning on it too much. Again, if that happens, bloody expensive. Now the transmissions, which are actually made by ZF, not Maserati, Ferrari or VM Motori, and which is probably why they're fairly good. Now, so you don't have to remember all of the issues that Adam and I have covered, we've listed them in our free Ghibli cheat sheet. The link's down below.
So by now you're probably thinking that buying a used Maserati Ghibli is only really for the truly brave, the deeply committed, or the possibly very insane, right? But what if I told you that prices for these here in Australia currently kick off from as little as $20,000? Although a $20,000 Ghibli should best be avoided, as should a $165,000 Ghibli, because that's what the prices currently top out at. Because thanks to depreciation, a $165,000 Ghibli is going to give your accountant a heart attack. Remember, Maserati and depreciation have a toxic relationship. However, in saying all of that, really, really good condition post-update examples, they kick off from around about $55,000. And these start to make a little bit more sense. At that point, you'd like to think that they've suffered the worst of the depreciation, and being a post-update, they should dodge many of the earlier issues, so you can start to understand why they might seem like an appealing proposition. I'll just repeat, you can start to understand because we certainly can't. Buying a used example can be just the beginning of the financial pain. One owner told us that his Ghibli costs around 4 times more to maintain than his Lexus, even though the Lexus does over 4 times the mileage. And that's before factoring in any potential repair costs. And then beyond the finances, the hit to miss ratio when it comes to build quality and fit and finish is some of the most extreme we've seen in any car we've featured. This one, for example, an absolute hit. Plenty of others, misses. Look, if being able to tell people that you own a Maserati brings genuine value to your life in the same way that owning a Louis Vuitton handbag or Versace sneakers makes you feel special inside, well, that's kind of sad, to be honest, but I suppose it's a valid reason to buy one. But seriously, wouldn't you just rather a car that actually has genuine depth and talent and quality? Like one of these, and this one's a V8. Now we have to say a massive thank you to Rick and the crew at Lexus of Chatswood for lending us this Ghibli. This is actually for sale with the guys at the moment. Although maybe talk to them about buying something else on the lot before you buy this one. This is actually one of the good ones, but yeah, I wouldn't.